and welcome to Xena Warrior Podcast. My name is Vera, and I am joined, as always, by my two lovely co-hosts, Katie.
Hello.
And Livy.
Hi.
How are you guys today?
I'm good.
Super.
How are you, Vera?
Alrighty. We are talking about episode 111 and 112, The Black Wolf and Beware Greeks Bearing Gifts. One of them I would say is kind of important, and one of them I would say is kind of like, why was I forced to watch this?
Really?
But it's an episode of Xena.
It is, so hence they're both amazing.
Nobody's twisting your arm.
Yeah.
You're sitting there with a big smile on your face.
That's right. Black Wolf, let us begin. I would call this one Robin Hood Spartacus.
Yes, for sure.
Very good.
Excuse me while I sip my whiskey.
Take your time.
What's your first note? My first note is hats.
My first note is I'm the Black Wolf,
Oh,
which
okay.
goes into the Spartacus comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first note is straight up, I am Spartacus, so.
Okay, so I guess we will discuss hats, because that's clearly what's important. No, it's just like your typical Xena village being attacked by tax collectors. Well, tax collectors are harassing the villagers.
Yeah,
like for King Xerxes.
King Xerxes seems to be, a king more in the model of King Richard from Robin Hood.
Right.
A tyrant who mostly just wants taxes.
The soldiers take the money, and then out come these ninjas.
Yeah.
And that's where you get, like, they're the Black Wolf ninjas.
I guess my question here, I was a little confused about the Black Wolf's organization.
Me too.
Like, we have Flora.
Right.
We have her boyfriend, Diomedes. And then there are these ninjas who seem
Right.
really well-trained, kind of, like this, like, militia.
Yeah.
And we never see them again. I'm
Well,
not sure
they're the
where...
guys, they're all the guys in the prison with her. Oh my god.
My whiskey just exploded.
All the guys in the prison are those ninjas.
I guess.
No, they all are supposed to be really good at fighting.
They just didn't seem like those ninjas once they were unmasked and in prison. They seemed like extras sort of
You mean they
wandering
weren't the stunt
around.
people?
They were just like wandering around shiftlessly, and like all of that organization and training just was not apparent afterwards.
Regardless of the organizational structure of the Black Wolf organization, the ninja fight was pretty cool, I thought. There were some fun angles going on. This episode was full of really cool low angles, especially you'll see in a second on Xena and Argo looking really pretty in the landscape.
Oh yeah, so Xena and Argo, they are by themselves.
Right.
In this beautiful kind of New Zealand shot, riding around. Mm-hmm. And Argo seems to have a problem with her shoes. And then Xena's like, I also need new shoes.
Right.
I love that this whole episode can kind of be boiled down to Xena's quest for footwear.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of her motivation for the episode, which I like. I like that we have a throwaway episode about Xena doing good deeds in the hopes of getting some shoes out of it.
Mama needs a new pair of shoes.
Mama needs a new pair of shoes.
Yeah, so that's how she gets to the village, is because she needs to kind of have the blacksmith.
Right.
Sort
And
of.
Gabrielle is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, we have no idea where Gabs is.
Is the speculation more that Xena is riding ahead or something?
She seems really chill about it.
Like she's going to, I don't know, investigate? No, because
she's not
then
doing anything, really.
she-
They're separated for no reason.
finds out that everyone needs new shoes and then goes to this village. So how does Gabrielle know where to find her?
She seems to know that
Yeah.
village is where they're going to rendezvous. But
Right.
it's unclear why the separation in the first place.
Yeah.
But you know, within these episodes, a lot of people just kind of know where people are.
Right.
Their inner GPS just knows. Even though it's ancient times and it's
She
really
has
difficult.
Gabdar, like she just knows where she is at all times.
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
good.
Xena witnesses this lady being harassed by King Xerxes' men while she's kind of giving Argo to be fitted for the new shoes. And it turns out she knows this woman, Hermia.
Presumably from Amphipolis.
Right.
It's a little unclear. It's
Yeah.
never quite stated. But she knows her from more than 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good because we'll come to find out Xena is very, very busy 10 years ago. So definitely at least more than 10 years ago.
By more than 10 years ago, she means 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Which is, of course, how we all say that.
Yeah, of course.
It's sort of interesting that Hermia's reaction to Xena isn't any kind of hostility. It's sort of like, when you go home to your hometown and meet someone, like a neighbor you haven't seen in a while. And
Yeah,
you're
like
kinda
you run into people at the mall.
hey. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting given the kind of intensity of Amphipolis's reaction to Xena when she goes home. And here we have a former village person from Amphipolis who's just like, oh, hi, Xena. What's up? Have you seen my daughter?
Well, she has a problem. Her daughter is in a gang, I guess, that this woman does not want her to be. She's in love with this dude, and they're in this gang. I mean, does she know?
She clearly does not know and doesn't find out in the course of the episode.
No. No, she never finds out. Poor mom.
Well, so she wants Xena to rescue her daughter. And the daughter at this point has been put into the dungeon already, right?
Yeah.
Because Xerxes, he locks everyone up, and he's like, if you don't reveal who the Black Wolf is by tomorrow, everyone's getting executed?
There's some kind of
they're in the
Zeus
dungeon.
feast.
This episode has a very elaborate plot.
Yeah.
And I think any attempts to actually untangle it are going to be for naught.
Yeah, let's not even bother.
I have a dialogue that says, my name is Xena, I'm a problem solver.
Yes, that's how she described herself to the king, right? To Xerxes.
Yeah. And she will find the Black Wolf for him for 10,000 dinars and a new pair of boots.
Yes, get those boots.
Yeah, so she wants to, go undercover into this dungeon, kind of like trying to find the supposed Black Wolf for the king. But really, she obviously wants to find Flora and GTFO from that dungeon with this girl.
Mm-hmm. I found her throughout this episode doing all of these schemes and plans to have a great look on her face at all times of enjoying everything. She seemed to be taking a lot of glee in this episode.
That first scene with Xerxes and his assistant Kulos. There's just like this massive close-up on Lucy Lawless through the whole scene. Like the other guys are, in more like medium close-ups. And like there's this big close-up of Xena just like, with the eyebrow arched, looking just, sort of swaggery and almost gleeful.
Yeah, like she's having fun.
Yeah.
She did have a lot of pleasure fighting this guy, Kulos. I didn't even bother writing his name down. Kulos? Okay.
What was his name again?
She had a lot of pleasure kind of fighting him, and then probably other fights too, right?
I thought all the action in this episode was very sort of loose and funny and entertaining.
Yeah.
I think this episode had a lot of action compared to other Xena episodes, and you really had the sense that this was an episode where Xena herself was maybe cutting loose a little bit.
There was a lot of set pieces designed to be like, because she's undercover, he and her are fighting Kulos, and, she may be beating him up a little too much, and he's all like, what are you doing? And he's like, you wanted it to be believable kind of thing. So hence the pleasure kind of comes out, because she knows this guy's bad already, so it's like a double...
Yeah, you can't help but wonder if maybe this is Xena. We've seen her in this position of, like, kind of going undercover and pretending to be battle Xena again. And here she is doing that, but she's maybe not quite doing it as persuasively. Her annoyance with Kulos is kind of getting the best of her. And yeah, she beats him up a little bit too much and then ends up paying the price for it with getting dumped in the hole.
What do we think of King Xerxes?
Well, he looks like he has been transported from a old Hollywood 1960s Spartacus-like movie.
He came straight out of Spartacus.
His whole look
insane.
And aesthetic, crazy.
Mm-hmm. And I found it really funny how he's supposed to be this big, like, fighter. Like, there's a scene where he's training with a dude, and he's clearly not really that good at it.
He throws the dagger, just like Draco from the pilot, but somehow is not
like
as
that actor from the 50s
impressive.
Isn't quite cutting it. Even though the plot, the script tells him to. So this is also the introduction of Salmoneus and Gabrielle. And also, I guess, the first time we see Salmoneus on Xena.
On Xena, yes.
We've seen him with Xena before.
Right.
Of course. Hercules.
Yes.
Where he was kind of doing his, like, campaign to, like, be her PR person.
Yeah, and he was doing his campaign to be the PR person of the Black Wolf in this one. What was the line? His slogan? Just cry wolf.
Yeah.
Just cry wolf.
Not bad.
It was great.
I do think he's some kind of, like, Hollywood parody. Is that, you think, the idea behind this character? He's meant to kind of be an agent?
Well,
I can see that.
Are we getting into problematic jar territory?
This is, I think, the origins of Salmoneus are slightly problematic.
Oh, the problematic jar. I don't have any coins on me for this episode.
We didn't expect to have any problematic coins in this one.
There it goes.
All right.
But yeah, like his whole shtick, if you'll permit the word, is that he's always trying to sign people as their agent.
But he's also a businessman in terms of he barters and he tries to sell things always. So there's just a lot of very specific kind of
He wants all the heroes to think about their image and tries to come up with better ways of kind of selling them to the people.
Yeah, and he's always trying to make money out of something.
So, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, beating around the bush, I mean, he's a Jewish stereotype. But I love him.
Yes, he's really lovable as a character, generally. And that I think it's a lot to do with the actor is very funny.
Yeah,
Robert Trebor.
Yeah.
He has great line delivery.
Yeah, exactly.
He's wonderful.
Excellent comic timing, and he can take even the most innocuous line and make it funny. The good thing about Salmoneus, though, is that he's a very three-dimensional character, in part because he appears so much on Hercules. He's a fully sculpted character, and I think that's a good way of avoiding stereotyping, is that when you take the time to fully develop a character, you're not so much thinking about the tropes, you're thinking about the person. Yeah. And Salmoneus is a really appealing character.
And in this one, when he sees Xena, his line is amazing.
It is amazing.
He's on the floor and he's like looking at her legs, basically, and he's like, those boots, that leather, those legs, Xena!
Maybe that can be our new podcast slogan.
Yes.
So according to Whoosh, he added the legs line, right? It was originally just boots and leather, but he added the legs, or he wanted to say thighs, but couldn't get away with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is funny because he's recognizing her by the boots, which she's really eager to replace this episode.
Right?
See, it's important. But what do we think of him meeting Gabrielle? That was pretty great.
With the tomatoes, So Gabrielle, when she finally shows up,
she gets Xena. A lot of exposition from the guy who's giving Argo new shoes. He basically exposes the whole scene about how the Black Wolf and all of these people are in the dungeon. She has to get him, blah, blah, blah. The only way to get in is to be thrown in.
Right. And she's having a lot of fun. This is an episode where it feels very low stakes, even though they're all in a dungeon, just because everybody's having so much fun, which is kind of, again, part of the charm of, fun fights and these plots themselves are, so Gabrielle's whole mission now is to get herself into the dungeon, even though she has no, plan to get out of the dungeon. She just needs to find Xena. So this is how she meets Salmoneus, when she, is trying to throw a tomato at a bunch of guards.
Yeah, and he's trying to sell her some packs that he's like, that's a wolf pack, get it?
But she ends up getting him arrested.
That's right, because the guards wouldn't believe that she could be able to throw it. I believe one line was, as if.
Because she's adorable and wearing a hat. She talked about her hat.
I mean, it's very clever.
Clever.
It's really clever,
She disguises the chakram inside this ridiculous hat. But it's also a really cute and almost flattering hat if it weren't, about to fall off her head every time she nods. But I actually thought this episode was a little odd in that it felt like a teensy bit of a regression for Gabrielle's character from the Amazon episode where she, had just learned to fight. And here, she doesn't even carry her staff. She seems very much back to being a completely nonviolent companion to Xena, who is very active and, is throwing her tomatoes, conspiring ways to smuggle in Xena's weapons to her. But it's Xena's weapons, not Gabrielle's. So I wonder if maybe this was another episode that was perhaps written before the Amazon episode.
Well, her outfit.
How do you explain the outfit?
I don't.
Well, the thing about this is that what this episode was concerned about was the relationship between Xena and Flora versus Xena and Gabrielle. So this one-off character that I guess maybe they were like, oh, we can use her later. I mean, she never comes back, and I mean, rightfully so.
The actress was not very...
She wasn't good. I didn't really have a connection at all between... they were telling us that they had this great childhood connection, and I'm like, I don't really need that.
You don't believe it's there.
Yeah.
It just feels like actors saying lines. Yeah.
At the same time, we do get a lot of information about Xena's childhood, let's say.
All right,
let's go more than 10 years back.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that the writing in the episode has a complete grasp on the timeline at this point, and especially given what we know about Xena 10 years ago, it's certainly not fitting that they would be hanging out 10 years ago.
Xena was busy 10
yeah,
years
so
ago.
it's 15 years ago,
Sure.
maybe, whatever, I don't know. That you find out this relationship that she has with this girl, regardless of whether or not we can, like, actually feel it between the actor that's playing her. Xena says that this person is the closest thing she's ever had to a sister, right? And that she used to teach her all these lessons, and that she taught this girl how to fight. And she also taught her how to embroider, bringing us to the very first instance of Xena telling us that she has many skills.
That's right. We've been saying this in like every podcast, but this is the first time I actually hear it on the show.
I think it's my favorite running gag, and it doesn't actually pop up that much. So every time it does, I'm always really excited because I feel like Lucy Lawless just has a great deadpan on it, and this is like just her at her most deadpan. Mm-hmm. This, one arched eyebrow, stone face. I have many skills.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
And here it's in regards to the fact that she's being questioned that she knows how to embroider.
Yeah.
We know a little bit about how she kind of had a happy childhood and probably would have learned everything like a normal girl would have. So she does have these hidden talents.
And coincidentally, that is the only line that remained from the writer's original draft that he handed in.
Whoa.
I have many skills.
Yeah. Because
what was around it, if that was the only line?
It's a little complicated, but it involved, he was a freelancer, so it involved WGA rules where once you write 2 drafts and you hand it in, like, because he's a freelancer, he can't write another draft. So the staff has to take over, and via changes and whatnot, a lot of his script just got decimated. So I don't know what it was originally.
The plight of a freelancer, it's always rough.
It's rough, but he did come up with this very classic line.
I hope he was paid every time it was spoken. I don't think that's how it works. But that'd be nice.
Well, it's iconic and wonderful, and totally need to mark this first instance of it because it's great.
One other thing we should talk about is that story about the tree.
Yes.
Xena, Flora, and the tree. Xena is the cool older girl who climbs a tree, and when Flora wants to join her, Xena reaches down, offers her hand, and says, "Have faith." And Flora reaches up for the hand, and Xena pulls it away because Xena was a bully growing up.
Yeah, really.
I think it's because she has all these brothers. It's just normal for her.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine.
Just one, really.
You can imagine that this is how her brothers treated her. Yeah.
Which is, I guess from Lucy's own kind of perspective, because she has all these brothers herself.
That's true. She was probably also in the cycle of bullying growing up.
Yeah. And should we talk about that other line? The times change people and people change the times.
Oh, yeah.
We should.
Talk about it, please.
So that's a line that Xena often said around the village growing up. And it's again, like a lot of the exposition in this episode, it's a little unclear, but I have the sense this was her right before the warlord was going to invade Amphipolis, and she's trying to get the rest of the town to militarize and take a stand. So this is Xena's rallying cry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Flora's trying to implement it here with her wolf pack, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we're not supposed to know that she's the Black Wolf. We're supposed to think that her boyfriend is Diomedes.
Yeah, the episode is working overtime to convince you that it's Diomedes. And I think any viewer with an ounce of sophistication knows that it's Flora. Even Salmoneus says, like, I'm running my bet, and the odds are best for Diomedes. So
again, more problematic kind of Salmoneus takes there. I thought it was really funny because they dressed, Diomedes is dressed in literally like the Robin Hood outfit, which coincidentally is kind of like what Autolycus wears as well.
Well, he too, obviously.
But he's the king of thieves.
Yeah, better than the prince of thieves.
That's right. You're right. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sort of like Errol Flynn flavor in Xena, particularly in Autolycus's episodes. And yeah, here is sort of an early, very like Robin Hood serial episode. Like it's kind of wearing that influence on its sleeve with those costumes.
Yeah, but I thought it because he's the one who's wearing that Robin Hood outfit. Like it's again, arrows are pointing like he's the Black Wolf.
Yeah, but Flora's got these like cool black leather gloves, so it's totally her. Can we talk about Xena's underwater war cry?
Sure, that was pretty great.
I thought that whole sequence was really neat. Yeah. And yeah, like that moment where she can do the war cry underwater, and it sounds basically the same.
But in a watery way.
Like a gargly way.
Sound waves work differently for Xena.
I think it would sound that way. I think it was legit, and Lucy Lawless, much like Xena, has many skills.
She does have many skills. She can breathe underwater. She has gills.
What about Gabrielle when she finally gets into the dungeon and how she's describing if anybody has seen Xena?
Is this the subtext nation over here, right? Yeah. How great was that?
It was incredible. I mean, it was legit. Like, that is how you would describe her.
It was about as good as that line about her legs.
Yeah. I mean, she's like, have you seen Xena? Tall, beautiful, piercing blue eyes, swings a mean right hook. Gabrielle wears obviously, like, the hat as the chakram, but she also has the whip as the belt. Mm-hmm. So she really accessorized with Xena's weapons in this
Looking
one.
good.
Did the belt ever get used? I really wanted a moment where, like, Xena reached out to, like, the small of Gabrielle's back and pulled.
And she spun around like a top.
I was waiting for it.
I don't know. Did they use it to kind of get up? You know what I mean? Like, I don't actually remember.
All right, viewers, you can write in and let us know if we missed the belt.
But they get out. The chakram gets used, though, in this big climactic moment where, Xena reveals, because she has a plan, of course, but she reveals to the king that Flora is the Black Wolf, and then they're going to execute her. And she's all like, have faith, Flora, the tree, blah, blah, blah.
Again, so funny that this moment that I would just write off as adolescent bullying is now being, like, passed off as, like, a life lesson, a necessary life lesson.
This episode had a lot of good Xena lines that are very either life lesson-y or motivational. So we've already talked about the times change people, people change the times. She also says causes aren't lost until everyone gives up or something like that. Yeah. Just stuff that I would get tattooed for our current days, like just motivational stuff.
Yeah, way better than that line about men have the world because we gave it to them from last week. This is the kind of motivational speeches that I can get behind.
While we were talking about Gabrielle first coming into the dungeon and being introduced to Salmoneus, I loved his reaction to Xena calling Gabrielle her friend. He just very incredulously is like, you have a friend? Yeah. Just because the last time we know that he saw her, she was still in her half evilly trying to get out of it ways. And he was a very big champion of her early on. So I think it's cool for him to see that she's grown to a point where she has an actual friend.
It's also funny because, like, thinking back to Salmoneus and Xena on Hercules, and, he kept, like, making all these jokes, and she was like, yes, I'm amused. She doesn't actually laugh. She just sort of stares at him and is like, you're funny. I won't kill you. And you kind of compare that to how she is here, where she does have this wonderful, dry sense of humor and a lot of patience for Gabrielle's ridiculousness. And you realize just how far she's come, even between season 1 of Xena and Hercules.
Yeah, for sure. Well, she uses the chakram to free all the Black Wolf people in this crazy way where the chakram, with its chakram POV, goes through all of the chains.
It's a very good chakram. Yeah. Chakraming.
Yeah. And she kills the king, of course. The body count, I believe, is
that
20
was very violent.
Yeah.
In an episode that had been quite delightful and sort of... this is a regular episode of Xena.
The same episode where she kicks Kulos like a bowling ball and he just slides on his butt like across the floor.
That was right after this.
A window. Right.
She kills this she like fights the king, kind of kicks him. I guess it's an accident, but at the same time, whatever, she did it. He flies across the courtyard and falls onto this like busted axe that she busted and put there. And he like completely impales on it.
Right. Yeah, in this episode, it had lots of fun choreography. You could take some of these sequences and show them to people as, this is a really fun Xena fight. And then that was just like, whoa, he just got impaled.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's what's so cool about the violence on Xena is it has this huge kind of range of what it can portray. It can be really funny slapstick, and then just on a dime, it becomes brutal.
Yeah.
But her body count, keeps rising, guys.
Keeps rising. Oh, yeah.
Is there anything else to say about this episode? Oh, you know what? I loved the last shot, I have to say. The last shot, which is Flora being reunited with her mother, but Xena kind of wistfully looking at this tableau. I thought that was very revealing and Amphipolis-based.
Yeah, it certainly made me think of Cyrene.
Exactly, that's what I mean. So I thought it was really curious that the episode ended with this kind of shot on Xena.
I saw it as a moment where Xena was like, okay, she's about to find out that her daughter isn't who she thinks she is.
Way to ruin it.
I mean, it's important. This is a show, Gabrielle has gone through the same thing with parents who kind of have expectations that don't really match the reality of who their daughter is. Cyrene struggling with a similar issue, and now we have Hermia, who also...
You don't think that she was kind of smiling and kind of happy but sad about it?
Yeah, no, I think those were being happy and sad that her mom is going to find out the truth is, I think, the correct emotion to feel. It's a sad thing because it's going to be hard for the mom, but it's a happy thing because she's going to be honest with her daughter and they'll be able to see each other for who they really are.
Well, I'm choosing to interpret that moment as her remembering her childhood in Amphipolis.
Cyrene!
Exactly. What about you, Katie? Any final thoughts?
Gabrielle's tomatoes.
What about the porridge that she actually does use to get into the
we forgot
dungeon?
about that line of Salmoneus touching the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
My literal last note is about Xena side-eyeing Salmoneus over the line about Gabrielle's tomatoes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and we didn't mention the rock guy, aka Log Lady from...
Oh my gosh.
from the dungeon.
I love that he's like, do you like my rock? And Xena's just like, no.
That is one of those parts where you're like, that rock guy, he's important. He is always in the background with his rocks. What is his deal?
He actually reminds me of Cheese Guy from Buffy, if we're looking for connections to Buffy.
Wait, but Cheese Guy really didn't have anything to do with anything.
Oh, yeah, but you're supposed to think
this guy was a spy who had a secret rock that you could hide notes in.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Speaking of how you had mentioned, Gabrielle and her parents and trying to be a particular person, I think that is a good point to bring up as we move into Greeks bearing gifts.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so Greeks bearing gifts. Very famous saying. And this is an episode dealing with the Trojan War.
That quote, beware Greeks bearing gifts, is kind of a rephrasing of Virgil from the Aeneid, where a character says, I fear the Greeks, even those bearing gifts, or even when they bear gifts. Yeah. Actually, it seems like that's when you should fear them the most.
I did find it really interesting how, you were sympathizing with the Trojans in this one when...
Were you, though? Because all the Trojans we met were terrible.
Well, Xena was, and Perdicas was, hence we, the audience, are supposed to...
Xena is, sympathizing with Helen, who's Greek. And
right, and then she goes around murdering all of the guys to get into Troy. I don't know, I felt like a little bit upset because I was always Team Greece in the Iliad, so hence I'm a little bit miffed.
Well, it's quite striking that this episode doesn't have any of your Greek faves in it. There's no Achilles, no Ulysses.
They have been dead for many years, according to that one episode.
That's right, from the Reckoning.
That's
Xena
right.
says Agamemnon.
Yeah, so that's why you have Menelaus.
Yeah, except then are they?
Well, they're not in this one. Literally, all those guys she says are not in this one. That's why you have Paris's new brother.
Right.
But it's true that
whatever his name is.
Odysseus and Agamemnon both survived the Trojan War, so they really ought to be there.
I think this is just a good example of how Xena uses all of the Greek mythology in this very, unique Xena way. It's very just postmodern and reference-y, and they live across a span of 1,000 years, it seems.
Yeah.
Have you thought about how the entirety of the Trojan War is happening while Xena is doing her stuff because it's 10 years
10
ago.
years! So much can happen in 10 years.
Yeah.
I do think it's actually really smart that they chose to adapt it this way without any of these kind of iconic hero figures, because Xena should, of course, be the hero of the Trojan War. You don't want Achilles there stealing focus from her.
Didn't you want her to fight Achilles?
I mean, that would have been really cool.
Yeah, it would have been even better than that movie, Troy.
Could anything be better than that movie, Troy?
This episode of Xena is probably better than
Vera,
Troy.
for those who don't know, loves Troy the most of all movies.
Not because it's good, but because I'm shallow and the fight between Achilles and Hector is iconic. That's why I want to see Xena fight him.
I missed Hector also from the preceding.
Well, he's dead, according to Dreamworker. So,
Yeah.
and that's why we have that with this weird fake brother.
Who's a real brother? I looked him up.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool.
Not only that,
Good job,
but
episode.
yeah, Deiphobus.
Deiphobus, yeah.
Deiphobus did marry Helen, according to some sources, after
no.
Paris's death. So this episode is adapting some pre-existing information about this character.
That guy was the worst.
Also, according to some sources, Helen hated him, unlike Paris, and maybe orchestrated his death and mutilation at the hands of Menelaus.
Oh, yeah. You go, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I recall, Helen had like really difficulties after the war.
It would take it out of anyone. It's a long period of being in a siege, and the PTSD must be just off the charts.
Let's talk about this episode and the look of it, because I feel like it's a little bit different than any other episode we have seen so far. Wouldn't you girls agree?
I would absolutely agree.
It is directed by one Mr. T.J. Scott, who I definitely call my favorite Xena director.
Absolutely. And not just like our favorite, but I feel like his advent kind of foreshadows what the show will become. Like, he's bringing in a lot of look that kind of becomes the definitive Xena look. And here you're seeing it in its kind of infantile stage.
And this is very televisual, cool stuff from this time period, I think. The opening dream sequence had that sort of, not quite fisheye, but circular, crazy look to it that you could probably describe a little better than me, which immediately pinged me for American Horror Story.
Alejandro Gomez Rejon
There you go.
First in American Horror Story Asylum, and then he made kind of like the look of the show in the next season, Coven.
So this is just another example of Xena being one of these mid-90s genre TV shows that are really contributing to the televisual look of TV. I'm trying not to say cinematic because I have a whole beef with calling TV cinematic, but that is really what I'm saying. You know, earlier you had Twin Peaks and you have the X-Files, and it's just doing stuff that's much more visually cool and unique than your standard primetime soap opera that would be popular at the time. ER, which was doing its own thing, or, you know, stuff like that.
Melrose Place?
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about not doing just like a two-shot, medium close-up kind of structure. This is a guy who's using a lot of crane shots, a lot of moving camera. Mm-hmm. Literally, this opening sequence uses the same kind of thing that you will see later on in the first 2 episodes of season 4 in the crazy kind of like northern Amazon shaman-esque dream stuff. It looks very similar to this. I mean, it's the same director. So
yeah, it's a very like subjective camera. You immediately see shots like that and you're like, this is some kind of fever dream.
Yes. Well, I mean, at that point, it was kind of supposed to be.
Yeah, he usually deploys it to be actual fever dreams.
Yeah. But his staple is that he loves a moving camera, as do I. As an editor, I absolutely gravitate towards that. And then when Renee, who directed 2 episodes of Xena, was shadowing TJ to learn what to do, which was the season 4 openers, that is definitely the thing she picked up, is that he always has a moving camera that she implemented in a strange way in her episode where it's just like people in an office sitting around. So, but it's really great that that's like the one thing that she picked up on.
What are some of his big episodes?
Well, he did Callisto, which is huge. Return of Callisto, huge. I don't know if he might pop up. I certainly don't quite remember like another one in the middle, but then the openers of season 4.
Oh, that makes sense.
Those were his
He may have directed The Debt.
Did he? No. It was this other guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I know for sure.
But I feel like The Debt's direction was very influenced by stuff that he's kind of laying down here.
Yeah, and I mean, other directors like John Fawcett, who did really good episodes scattered throughout the series, they all bring in something, and this was TJ sort of trying to be like, this is kind of what I want the show to look like. I don't know if he entirely succeeded, because clearly it's like whichever director comes in, it's like his vision, and also a lot of it depends on, how they're doing with their day, and TV turnaround in a 22 episode is really difficult. And if you have like just a normal episode, like it's not much you can do.
Right.
But these are like huge ones with huge set pieces, and he did a really good job kind of establishing what he wanted the look to be.
I really love, you have such a sense of the space in this episode. You really feel that battlefield with the, corpses and like shard skeletons on wagon wheels.
They're going to reuse that shot later.
And then you have the fort, which is Troy. And you really, you're up on those battlements, you're down those staircases into like the central courtyard. Xena at one point is thrown into the dungeon and looks out her window and sees the Trojan horse.
That's such a beautiful shot. That's like, what is you call it, chiaroscuro light?
Churros light.
Yeah, it's chobo light.
Back to the chobos.
On her eyes, are so blue, so wonderful. She swings a mean right hook. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that reminded me of film noir, like that really extreme eye light.
It's wonderful, yeah.
But my point with that is that you really just have a sense of how all these spaces are connected. You really feel that sense that this isn't just like a set and a set and a set, but like a real space that you can imagine yourself standing in and walking around.
You could really feel that. And I think the whole Troy set had, for its time, it was very like Winterfellian,
Yeah, because they go around walking on the wall of it.
Yeah, you could really see where everything was in regards to everything else. It looked really great. It seemed big. There's a great, just talking about the directions more, the tracking shot, I think, of Perdicas, where you follow him literally up and around whatever
from the wall
that's called down the stairs. Like there's a scope to this episode that's very impressive.
Yeah, and when the fight happens, like Perdicas is talking to Deiphobus, other brother.
Terrible name.
Yeah.
Terrible.
The shot is just on them, and then you can see just the crane kind of moves over, and you can see the fighting with the Trojan horse below. I mean, that is the first time I feel like we see this kind of scale on Xena.
Yeah, so much simultaneous action.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And you really do feel it literally from that opening shot with Helen's dream, which I guess we should talk about.
Yeah.
I really thought Helen was really cool, like portrayed in a really cool way. I absolutely, fell for her, where she has this crazy fever dream of, a guy storming through their bedroom.
Again, wearing some Donnie Darko.
To kill everyone. And the imagery of Helen in Paris's bed is huge.
Yes, let's talk about that bed. I wrote down that it's like a satanic honeymoon suite.
Yeah.
She has this bed with these hangings. She has, like, the hot tub strewn with rose petals. She has this vanity with, like, cute little bottles of perfume. And it's just so oppressive. Like, it's all these, like, romantic, feminine furniture stylings. And you're just like, I hate this. This is a prison.
Yeah, and I mean, basically the way Paris was portrayed and treated her, it was.
Yeah. Let's talk about Paris.
Oh, man.
Paris is...
Wait, a quick shout out. Yeah. No offense to Diane Kruger, but I just think that it's great casting-wise that this is not a blonde white actress.
That's right. I mean, even when Diane Kruger was cast, I was like, really? Like, that's the woman that sends 1,000 ships? Okay. This lady was really great. I found her plight just way more even... palpable than actual Dan Kruger in that movie. I don't know why we're talking about that movie so much.
Because you love it.
As far as castings of Helen in the past, that's the only one that I know. So she's getting singled out. But
Helen is this ideal of feminine beauty.
Exactly.
And you expect, a statuesque, pale-skinned blonde. So to have a woman of color in that role who's just a wonderful actress and like has such presence, I think it's a really great trailblazing moment for the show. Totally. And it doesn't really make a big deal out of it, which just makes it even better.
The actress did a really good job, I thought. You would just really feel her state where, she escapes this guy, Menelaus, who we do see. He's like an old dude. Maybe that wasn't the best marriage. And, she goes off with Paris. And a 10-year war occurs because of this situation. But obviously right now she's unhappy with Paris. And I believe we were supposed to talk about him. To me, Paris is what I think Joel Edgerton looked like in the 90s. For sure.
That's unfair to Joel Edgerton.
With that hair, for sure. For sure. That was some 90s hair. But yeah, he was kind of like hashtag the worst.
Yeah. What is his line to her?
These nightmares rob you of your beauty. And after all, isn't that what I've been fighting for?
Right. And that's what is referencing, I think, everyone's touchstone to this story, where even if you don't know stuff like this very well, everybody kind of knows that Helen is supposed to be the most beautiful woman ever, and all this stuff. So, but to have a guy saying something like that, it's just gross.
Yeah, most of his lines to her are just so oppressive.
Yeah, you just are overwhelmed with hatred of this man almost instantly. That's his introduction. He just kind of like sits up into shot being like, honey, and you're just like, ew, he's repulsive.
Yeah. And I do think that's kind of the point. They are writing it this way to sort of create a different way of thinking about something so famous as this, that, this is kind of not a great attitude to have about a woman.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people maybe, would sympathize. Well, certainly the movie Troy sympathized with Paris, and gave him... It wasn't just like this. I like this kind of version where he is portrayed as kind of being the worst at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think the natural way of reacting to this story and myth is that, that it's a grand romance that starts a war. Yeah. So I love that this just immediately explodes the idea of it being a romance.
Yeah. Right.
Like, she is a prize to Paris.
Right.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's what
Yeah, and he says in the hot tub scene, I didn't fight 10 long years to listen to your judgment.
Yeah.
And then later says that he misjudged the situation. And I wrote that down in my notes being like, should have listened to someone else's judgment there, guy, huh?
Yeah, he stinks. What about how Xena and Gabrielle are starving in the woods?
They are starving in the woods. They have no food. They have half an apple. What happened to the 10,000 dinars from before?
Yes!
They didn't take that. They never take money.
Did she take the boots?
Did she get the boots?
We don't know. We're left on a cliffhanger.
So they're kind of wandering about, and they're close to Troy. And Xena does not want to go.
Yeah, and Gabrielle's like, oh, let's go to Troy. It's a perfect place to go, even though there's a war. Do you know Helen? Like, come on.
And Xena does know Helen.
Surprise. Of course she does.
They met in Sparta.
Did this episode portray any Spartans?
Nope.
Okay.
People from Spart?
Okay. So I guess it was just, the standard Greeks versus Trojans. I read a really funny factoid, though, about how apparently there were Spartans and they were acting whenever they delivered the dialogue, it was in a Southern accent, which is a long tradition of Americans doing Greek plays in a Southern accent.
Really?
I don't know. We didn't hear any, so never mind.
That is fascinating.
Huh.
Why in a Southern accent?
Because America's weird.
They're like, Greece is in the South.
Well, Spartans
specifically.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The introduction of Xena and Gabrielle entering Troy was a big sprint, like a literal sprint that Xena and Gabrielle did past the Greek army. This is where Xena kills a bunch of Greeks.
And they're all hiding underneath some secret, straw-covered hatches?
Yeah. For what purpose?
I don't know. I guess
if anybody comes out of the wall,
they're expecting the Trojans to come out.
It's just an odd.
Or if anybody comes,
that's not a typical siege tactic, I think.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with these ancient siege tactics.
I couldn't help but think of this set being later reused in that episode about the Horde.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, I would say it definitely has some visual similarities there. You have the dead guys up on stakes and stuff.
Yeah.
You have this sense of hanging smoke and charred flesh and just
I'm positive they're just reusing all this stuff for that episode.
Of course.
So they get into Troy, and this is where we meet Perdicas.
Yeah.
Perdicas 2.
Perdicas 2.
AKA Donny Osmond.
He looks so much like Donny Osmond.
Yeah.
I find that to be, I don't think it's in any kind of way an intentional thing, but I find that...
Can you imagine if it was? If they're like, we want an actor.
Donny Osmond-like.
But my point being that the association for me with just his face having that quality is that he's just such a wholesome, nice guy as part of that. So Perd is just the world's sweetest.
Yeah, he's absolutely 100% the opposite of Perd 1, who we saw in the pilot, who was controlling, he's like a simpleton.
Well, he had like one scene.
Yeah, and the one scene, he made a presence where he controlled Gabrielle. He
Right.
tried to control her.
But this episode kind of retcons that in the sense where he even says at one point that, you can't tell me what to do anymore, Gabrielle, kind of thing. So seeming like she had more power in the situation than was portrayed in what she was trying to get away from in Sins of the Past.
They really rewrote their relationship from what we saw.
But I think in a positive way. Like, I think this guy is very interesting and makes a very interesting pair for Gabrielle.
I do think it would be interesting, though, if, let's say, they went on from what we saw in the pilot and Gabrielle didn't really like him because he was stupid and boring and maybe tried to control her because he was going to be her husband. That would be, I think, maybe more interesting to see him become this Perd that we see today.
Well, you wonder if a lot of this is, the power of, like, retrospective vision. She was feeling so stifled in Potidia, and I wonder if maybe their relationship, with the impending nuptials got to the point where he was maybe being more controlling, and they were both, no longer the people they remembered each other to be.
That makes sense.
And now they've spent some time apart, and they can look back at all these fond memories, like stealing corn from the farmer.
Or like how her hat dropped into the river. And
He almost died. He almost died trying to save her hat.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense to me that, after a long separation, we meet Perdicas 2, and he's this much more charming and likable human than the man that we were introduced to.
And we find him fighting for Troy.
Yeah.
And he is Greek.
I know.
And
I'm just so confused.
he says that he specifically came here inspired by Gabrielle having told him stories about Helen and that he wanted to go somewhere where he could fight for love. Yeah. So he's crossed a huge line, it seems to me, to fight for Troy, right?
He was really upset that she left.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people back home wouldn't understand this particular quest. He's fighting against his own countrymen.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean that's a big step for Perd. And also I think it's interesting because it kind of sets up Paris and Helen as this ideal couple, like romance. Ugh. Where in fact I would say in this episode Perdicas and Gabrielle are much more of a romantic coupling than Helen and Paris, which just shows, the power of storytelling that elevates these figures who actually are much less wonderful than the ordinary people who look up to them.
Yeah, I like how Perdicas is portrayed. I mean, he has a moment where he's super brave. I mean, we just watched an episode, like a few episodes ago, where Gabrielle kind of does a crazy brave thing where she, jumps over Therese and the bows and arrows. And here, Perdicas is super brave, and Gabrielle is just so unexpectedly pleased with how
But also at first is unnerved by it. Yeah. She says, you're not a soldier. You don't belong here. All the things that Xena loves to say to Gabrielle whenever she's in a dangerous situation. Suddenly Gabrielle's turning around and saying them all to Perdicas.
Right.
But I guess I liked as an audience member that this is how they're showing him. Like, to me, and I'm already thinking of, like, sort of his next appearance, but to me, he is a typical soldier, like a sweet hometown guy who goes off, join some kind of cause, and then he's really affected by kind of like the war shapes him and whatnot.
He grows up.
Yeah. So I think you see that here, and as an audience member, I really felt it. And I admire the fact that they did this to him.
And he becomes almost a mirror for Gabrielle. Like, she too, is kind of stepping out into the wider world and creating this new identity for herself and, becoming a warrior. And it's kind of nice that she can look at this childhood friend who she didn't think much of at the time and sort of respect him in a way that, you hope someday she can respect herself too.
So there's a lot of parallels between Gabrielle and Helen in a weird way.
Yeah, I definitely saw these two sets of lovers as being like mirrors for each other, funhouse mirrors.
Yeah, well, in the sense that Helen and Gabrielle sort of were supposed to lead a very specific life, and then, there's that scene where Xena kind of like asks Helen like what she would do after the war, and she's like, what do you mean? What should I do? No one's ever asked me that. Because she never thought about that. She's always been, her identity is whichever man she's with, whether it's Menelaus or Paris.
Yeah, Gabrielle, unlike Helen, at an early age, wanted to get out of that scenario, wanted to be something else, wanted to make her own identity that wasn't something handed to her by men.
What do we think of Perdicas and Gabrielle and their kiss?
Oh, just generally.
Well, seeing kind of how this episode is going, this is her boyfriend of the week.
That's true. I would say if we're ranking boyfriends of the week, Perdicas is up there.
Perdicas is the only one you allow because of how they have a past and know each other.
But, they actually, I think the two actors have a really sweet camaraderie, compared to like Flora and Xena in the previous episode, who are not a couple, obviously. But, they're trying to invoke some sense of shared history that I think is really fake. You just don't buy it.
But Xena and Helen are great.
Xena and
have
Helen
the shared history
are great. But I think with Gabrielle and Perdicas, you really feel that. You feel that these two shared a life together, and I feel like that really informs like their body language. There's this great moment where Xena is talking to Perdicas and Gabrielle is out of shot, and just halfway through the conversation, like Perdicas spots Gabrielle and starts kind of like making eye contact with her and waving at her, and she's not in the shot, and yet you still have this sense of like their relationship.
It is a little bit like really cute juvenile kind of flirts, It really reminded me of kind of like a high school
sweethearts.
Middle school love.
They are high school sweethearts.
Very sweet.
All those stories. You go home and you visit your high school sweetheart, and those are the stories you tell. Him making an ass of himself to impress you. Yeah.
Let's get back to the myth here and the whole Greeks bearing gifts thing, where, eventually this horse does make it into Troy. Mm-hmm. It's a real
How do
big...
we feel about the horse?
He had adorable hair.
He did. He had like this mohawk.
Yeah. It's a good horse.
Adorable grass mohawk.
Yeah. Apparently TJ Scott was really worried that they wouldn't get like a big one, that it would be a small one.
Well, I actually liked it. It made a lot of sense that it was a modest size horse. It wasn't small. It wasn't huge.
Mm-hmm. It was just right for to hold
you could have like 3 people in there, which is all the people you need to like hop out and open the gates for the rest of the Greek army. So I kind of, I was like, props. You got your money's worth out of this horse.
Got their money's worth out of this whole episode.
Yeah. Hells yeah. Because of this horse appearing and the whole thing from the legend taking shape, where the Greeks do come out and they do attack and surprise the drunken Troy soldiers, you have Paris, who previously doubted Xena, apologize. I thought it was really interesting that he apologized a bunch of times.
At the last second, they try to humanize Paris. He has this scene with Helen where Helen comes out and says, you don't love me anymore. I don't love you. Like, we should go our separate ways. And, you can't help but feel bad for, like, the dumpy in a rejection scene. And then he goes on and admits to having kind of screwed up to Xena and apologizes. And I appreciated that, even though he's still absolutely the worst human being. Yeah. Like, he does get killed by his own brother, who just wants Helen for himself.
Yeah. He wants to start an entire new civilization of Deiphobus Helens.
Yeah, he's more worst. They're both worst.
It shows how there's this horrible cycle. When you reduce a woman to an object and a prize, all the people around you begin to share that view. The fact that Paris felt he could just steal Helen makes his own brother think, well, I can do that too.
Yeah.
It's icky.
It's really gross. I do, at the end of the day, I have like a ickiness about this whole thing.
So does Helen.
Yeah, yes, that's right. But she gets out, which is great. Good for you, Helen.
Yeah, it goes off with Perd.
Oh, yeah. Well, are we supposed to ship that?
I didn't necessarily ship it, but I felt like it was the episode telling us of the men depicted in this episode, Perdicas is clearly the best. He's the one who Helen kind of trusts to travel with, and considering all of the sort of exploitative, creepy energy she's inspired in men, it shows like a lot of faith in Perdicas. He's a good one.
Himself because he, even after he and Gabrielle, they changed their Facebook status to "it's complicated" here. I like that at the end he's like, I don't expect anything from you, and I'm going to go this way. And that's Helen follows him or like goes with him. And so that's the kind of man like who doesn't even pressure, a woman to do anything.
Yeah, which it was, I thought, a wonderful thing for Perdicas to do. And even Xena is surprised by it. Xena expects him to either invite himself along or to be invited by Gabrielle. And neither happens. And I think that's such a credit to Perdicas and, the maturity of both these characters that he goes off at the end.
I liked how Xena says, I thought he was going to travel with us for a while, which is something she said, well, at least implied with that guy Talus from the other episode, the other boyfriend of the week, that was like real perfect for Gabs. So it's interesting that
for me, Talus's perfection was so artificial because everything about him was just designed to appeal to Gabrielle. Whereas Perdicas, you feel like he's a real guy who like would kind of keep Gabrielle grounded and listens to her stories. He grew to become
a guy that she would be okay with.
Yeah.
Like Talus was like already formed that way.
Yeah. Okay. In the lab.
Yes. In the writer's room.
Oh, would they have been just okay?
Well, everyone would be okay. She already has found who she needs to be traveling with.
I really also love that Helen doesn't want Perdicas to announce her in the next town. She wants to just be a normal person. And, that's the ultimate escape from her life, is to kind of step away, not just from her identity, but like from her privilege.
Yeah, and her line, the only person who can make me happy is me, which is great.
Yeah.
She
wants her own life, she says.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very feminist message of this episode. Xena isn't usually like this openly feminist, I feel like. This is like almost like soapbox style. I mean, that's not a criticism.
Did you feel that like they're making a message, like they're doing a statement?
A little bit, but
really?
Not in a bad way. Just in, because you don't really see that thinking connected with Helen of Troy. So it was nice to have it here of all places, because here's a mythological figure who's really disempowered. And I appreciated Xena kind of stepping up and being like, this is someone who needs to be more like Xena, warrior princess.
I didn't really feel like a very, shoehorned in feminist message, but I can't help but say again that I just really loved this portrayal of Helen with the actress, and also just this character. You get so much empathy for her with her, PTSD of her ordeal, these dreams, this just terror that she lives.
All these men, three different men.
These men are just hounding her, and it's rough, man. It's rough. So I really appreciated all her scenes with Xena. And the fact that she gets to go off and just do her thing by herself.
Quick aside, I really loved the kind of cheeky symbolism of Helen taking off her crown and putting it on diffables there. Good old diffables.
I told you his name was bad.
And I love the very last part of this episode, which is Gabrielle wanting to take the giant horse with them, where she goes, it's bound to be a collector's item, which I thought was clear the fact that Salmoneus rubbed off on her from the previous episode.
No.
Like, come on.
I thought it was Gabrielle just wanting to have a horse, same as Xena.
It's just being winky at knowing the symbolism of this item.
Menelaus himself says, I would like to keep this horse as a memento of my victory. Yeah. So everybody from the second the horse is built is like, that horse is going to be meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of its like post-modern-y funness. It's a new antique.
Yeah, it is.
As Aphrodite would call her vases.
Yeah, it would go very high on eBay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else to say about these episodes or this episode?
Well, we're happy to have TJ as part of the family.
That's right. Yes. And I cannot wait for his next one. Oh, my God.
Yep. And it was fun to have Perdicas 2.
Yes.
Return as a different person. And we will be seeing him again.
And this seems like a very,
will come up again.
like, speaking very quickly about Gabrielle's arc in the long run, this was an important beat to hit.
Yeah.
Because she left her home. She knew she wanted something better for herself. But this is the first episode that kind of hits kind of the nostalgia button. You know, she's thinking like, oh, maybe things weren't so bad back home. There are things about it I liked, things about who I was in Perdicas that I liked. So I think that's actually a really important and nuanced beat for her character.
Right. But at the same time, she is now an Amazon queen. She knows how to fight. She breaks Effie's mom's staff in this one. She really holds her own in this battle. So it's the question of how or if she could go back even if she wanted to, right?
I hope so. I don't want her to be having any kind of regrets, like, you know, should I have left Perdicas in the first place?
Yeah.
Hells no.
No, I'm not saying that, but I think, you know, it's an important maturity to look back at, you know, the events that formed you and not want to reject any of it. They're all important in the same way that Xena's dark side is important to who she is now. Like Gabrielle's past in Perdicas as a normal village girl was important to molding who she is now. And it makes
but both
sense.
her and Perdicas are different people that, you know, they knew each other and how we knew them from the pilot as well.
Yeah, which is why their romance is so believable, because you feel like they've both now been through such similar experiences that they can find new common ground.
Good episode.
Yeah.
You can follow us on things.
Yes, as usual, we are on Twitter at Xena Warrior Pod, so come follow us over there and talk to us. Tell us what you think, any questions, comments about the episode. We are on Facebook at Xena Warrior Podcast, Tumblr, same name over there. You can subscribe on iTunes, and it would be super awesome if you do the whole rate and leave a review thing. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah, so do all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, the power. No, wait. Those boots.
that leather.
Those legs.
Oh, boy.